Hey, folks, Ben and Simon here. You are all there. Welcome to the Sunday night hanging right here on Sunday. And because my cousin's wife is real, geez, if I said AK Karma is real, without realizing it on either our behalf, they say, "Hey, Haas, let's do a hang." He's like, "Yes," not realizing it's the anniversary of Mr. Van Halen's passing. And, he's one of my in-house authorities on the man, and I've learned a lot over the years, and I still learn stuff, folks. So hope if you got a question, ask away, and if you got a comment away, and we'll get to a roll call here as people are rolling in. But first of all, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I've been traveling around the country and out on tour doing different things. I've had some gigs with an Australian artist called Daryl Braithwaite, and like I was just telling you in the green room, he was an Australian artist that was big in the 80s and 90s primarily when he had all these big hits, but he's still releasing stuff. He just released a new single last week, I think. So I've been traveling around doing shows with him, and we actually just did one in a place called Parkes, which is in New South Wales, which is just above, is the state above Victoria, where I am in Melbourne, and it's where they've got a huge satellite dish that is run by the Australian federal government, but I think ASIO, our Secret Service, has something to do with it too, and apparently there's a lot of UFO sightings and stuff like that. So I was hoping to either get taken on a little ride while I was there or zapped up or something, but nothing. And
dang it. Well, so better luck next tour, I guess.
Better luck next tour. Yeah, that's right. So I've been out on the road doing that, and also just finished a run around the country with a specially put together sort of 40th anniversary Bon Jovi tribute type thing, which was fun with a Australian singer called Rob Mills, who is pretty well known in this country as a singer and does musicals and releases records, but also sort of a TV personality. So it's been good. It's been busy. And then, there's always stuff in the studio as well. Always working with people on their songs and doing some of my own stuff, of course. And whenever I can squeeze in a little bit of time, then it's, like to fiddle around with guitar things and YouTube videos, stuff like that.
I get that. Well, let's see. We got 50 people watching so far, so I'm going to shout out. Let's see. We got Zach Thong, Terry's 3Gs, Dave Chase, Ferd Burfel, Charmaine Taylor in the house. So Charmaine, Patty Dill. Let's see. Patty Dill doing OU812 raid. Love it. Dave Chase, Ferd Burfel. They're all talking to each other. There's Billy Baloney. And then we've got Arf is here. Awesome. Hip Metal Works. Who else do we have here? They're all talking to each other because it's pre-gaming. I get it. Dastardly Dave is here. All the Daves. Awesome. Searching for Tone. Christopher Live Silva. Unfucking believable. Love it. He's going to have lots of Bon Jovi questions. I just know it. That's just trolling him. So, Your Junkie 35 is here. There's Trev, Symmetry. Good to see you, Trev. Six String Stanger. Michael Krause. OU812. There's Ryan. What's up? McCall Music. Charles 75N, who had Ian's Guitar Shack on his show earlier today. Lots of fun. Yetametsi Nightcat. JP Page 2. Joe McGraw. Wow. Lots of folks. And, no. I thought I was caught up. No. There's Guitar 45. BC Rich 581. Scott Brockway. Josh Tamberg. Wow. All right. Lots of folks. Scrolling. Keith H is here. Dan of New Jersey. John, ZD351. Fellow Melbourneite.
Yes. Hey, John.
Melburnian. Sure. Taylor 315. Wayne McConnell. Nice. Earl Coli. What are we drinking? Well, I got to crack open A&W root beer just for you, Earl. Blackjack Guitar. Steve Rezer, and we're caught up. Yes. Look at that, Charles. Only took 5 minutes. He and I always have a race because usually it's like 20 minutes doing shout outs.
Give me 1 second, Ben. I'm going to go get myself a drink so I can give you a little cheers.
Awesome.
I'll be right back.
There's Jimmy Ray Hawkins, Graphite and Cigars. What's up, Ronnie? I'll ask that question, Jimmy Ray. And let's see. If I missed anyone, please say hi again. I was trying to get through the chat quite, because it was like half an hour of y'all saying hey to each other and stuff. So awesome. Yes. And of course, if you have a question, the easiest way to stand out, some question marks in the front, or you at me, even though it doesn't highlight my name because it's StreamYard, and StreamYard blows in that respect. There's the voice of Cornhole. What's up, Donnie? Nice mug.
Yeah. Choose your weapon.
Love it.
Cheers, sir. What do I have to do? That.
Oh, wait, yeah. There we go. There's Michael B in the house with his member milestone message. Happy October. Super chat is a good way to stand out. I agree.
Hey, Ryan.
Add us, all the above. And it turns out I heard a vicious rumor that apparently StreamYard is doubling in price. So all money's going towards StreamYard in food for me. So
yeah, like everything's doubling in price at the moment. It's crazy.
And I realized I don't think they've raised their price. I've been using it for 5 years and they haven't raised their prices. So I get it in a sense, but on the other hand, $40 a month US. Oof. That's Let's see here. Earl asks, question for Simon. Do you know Leon Todd? I'm a big fan.
I do know Leon, Earl. Yeah, he's an awesome guy, and we're in touch. We haven't actually hung out and chatted face to face in person yet, but we're going to. We've been talking about doing that, and in fact, when Yngwie was out playing in Melbourne, it was a couple of months ago, I think. Leon's band Ragdoll were supporting, which was great too. I've obviously seen heaps of Leon's videos on his YouTube channel and stuff, but hearing him rip it live at full volume was awesome. So yeah, Leon's got a great channel if anyone hasn't checked it out, and he's all the way over on the other side of Australia, over in Perth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not local at all, folks.
Not local, and that would be why we haven't hung out that much in person, but we're planning on it. So
you think us Canadians are spread out? Australia's like, hold my Fosters, mate. I'm just saying. Yeah,
there's a so I mean, I guess on the far east coast of Australia, you've got Melbourne and Sydney, not too far apart, about a 60-minute flight. But then all the way over on the west side, complete on the coast on the other side, you've got Perth, and that's about a 4-hour flight, I guess.
Right. Jimmy Rock, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but Perth is a beautiful city, and if it weren't for the fact that it's so isolated, and because of its isolation, there's obviously not quite as much work there for a musician or whatever, but I would happily live in that city. It's clean. The weather's always gorgeous. Weather-wise, I would compare it to more like what California sort of is, It's like pretty consistent most of the year of the way through. The beaches are beautiful. The people are really nice. The food's great. It's a great city. It's a paradox, isn't it? Because what makes it so sort of almost pristine and beautiful is the fact that it's so isolated, but its strength is actually also its weakness. But yeah, great city over there.
Jimmy Ray Hawkins says, Simon, what about a Hosford Cook collab, like Smith Kotzen collab? Nevertheless, nice to be here and talking in the show. I like that. Okay.
So sorry, who's the collab with?
You and Brad Cook. So it'd be Hosford.
Oh, Cook. Yeah. Brad and I have been kind of like ships crossing in the night, like the last 6 months or so. We've been talking on the text about catching up in person and doing some stuff for a long time. But my schedule, as soon as winter finished here, I just started getting busy on the road. Sure. So it's been a little bit crazy. I mean, of course, it's good to be busy because winter, I don't know if it's the same all over the world. I assume it is. But for touring musicians, winter is generally pretty quiet. So as soon as spring.
Same here, like a lot of bands don't even gig in the winter here. Like even locally, they just,
nope.
If it's below freezing, we don't gig. And so there's opportunities to be had. But then again, because the winters are so cold here, the summers are just packed with action. Like something to do every weekend, whether private events, public events, big barbecue things, whatever. And thanks, folks, for the comments on the shirt. I can thank Milk Tea for the shirt.
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. I'm actually still on the road, so I'm not home in the studio. Otherwise, I'd be wearing something, with respect to Eddie as well. Ben and I were just talking in the green room that when we originally talked about me jumping on and this date, we didn't realize that, of course, it's the anniversary of Ed's passing. So so I don't have any Van Halen paraphernalia, I'm sorry, with me.
I've got a bunch, folks.
Okay, great.
Crazy how much I learned a lot over the years. I co-hosted a show with rest in peace Dave Nesdahl. Man, that guy knew his Van Halen stuff, and he was lucky enough that while Van Halen was in New York doing a press tour one year, he spent a week with Eddie, just hanging out and jamming, and because it all started, I guess. I think he was working at the Guitar Center, like in Manhattan, and Eddie came in. He needed an amp and a wah pedal. And they had an amp available, but they didn't have a wah. So he's like, well, you can borrow mine. So he grabbed the train out to Long Island, grabbed it back into the city, took it to the hotel room, and he's just like, hey, you want to jam? Okay. Do you want to hang? Sure. Called his wife at the time. I'll be back in a week, honey. Well, she's an ex-wife now. So, he had a good time. Rhodey's Jam Cave is here. A lot of stories he could tell on air, and still a few that he could not tell on air. I was like, here we are then. I'm not saying they may have hung out at the local ballet troupe on occasion, as I call them. So read into that what you will, folks. Unbelievable asks, still in touch with Proudfoot?
Yes, broadly speaking, but I actually haven't seen Glenn for a while now. We sort of haven't crossed paths. But incredible player, Glenn Proudfoot. Really, really incredible. Yeah,
I love this. Ronnie says, graphics go, geez, what is it with you people? We cook on the grill and swim all winter. You also live in Florida. And we do grill pretty much year round, but you put the barbecue right outside the patio door so you can stand inside and grill outside in the minus whatever, it could be minus 15 with a blizzard.
Yeah, I mean, John was just saying, he said, dude, we didn't see you through the winter when you weren't touring either, which is true. So apologies, John. And of course, we don't really have much of an excuse in Melbourne because about the coldest that winter would get is 0. It doesn't get any colder than that. So whereas I know that probably for you, Ben, and a bunch of other people in the chat, it gets much, much colder.
Oh, yeah.
You've got
really the days like in January and February, you hope for that one day where it might crack above 0.
Yeah, right.
And then it feels like a spring day. You're out there in a t-shirt. This is great.
Yeah.
Minus 20. So,
yeah.
Let's see. John says, I told my daughter, here we are. Put this up here. John says, I told my daughter I spent part of Saturday on a live stream talking EVH. And she said, what's that? Electric hybrid vehicles? And I said, no, Van Halen. She said, oh, that makes much more sense.
I know, but that would be a good name for maybe some sort of I don't know, like an Eddie Van Halen tribute where you weren't really allowed to use the initials. You could say, no, electric vehicle with hybrid.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Hip says, any Tommy and Manuel stories, words of wisdom, or memorable gigs? Because, of course, yes, you played a gig or two with Tommy, who's I'm going to say it, a monster of a player.
Yeah, I have over the years. I've been really fortunate that I started touring with Tommy as his electric guitarist because Tommy these days plays a lot of concerts just on his own in theaters and stuff like that. But he sometimes will get up special guests, of course, and so there'll be like 2 or 3 people on the stage. But he very rarely does it with a rhythm section anymore. Whereas back in the day, in the 90s and I think up to about the early 2000s, he would still sometimes tour with a band. And so because he would spend most of the show on his acoustic guitar, he would have me playing all the electric guitar parts that were recorded on the album. And at that time, he had all these guest electric guitarists when on songs where he wasn't playing electric. People like, I mean, there's one album in particular called "Can't Get Enough" where he had Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, like all these incredible electric players. And so they were all the parts that I had to play on the tour, which, as you can imagine, was just horrible. Who wants to be playing Robin Ford and Larry Carlton parts next to Tommy Emmanuel, right? So
yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. So I was very lucky, and the gigs were always great. The band, the musicians that he handpicked was always fantastic. So it was a good band of fully pro players with good pocket and good tones. And the great thing about a Tommy Emmanuel gig is because he's like, I guess what you would call a musician's musician. There'd be lots of improvising and extended jams and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so that was so much fun. And we traveled, we did a run around the States. We did things like the Catalina Island Jazz Festival. And then we did a run around Europe too, that even included places like Russia and stuff. So it was really, really, really fun. One of the things that I can tell you, I mean, like you were saying, Ben, I think everyone knows what a monster player Tommy is. In fact, Steve Vai is quoted, I think in a Guitar World interview or something, as saying that he's the best guitarist in the world. So coming from Steve Vai, I think that's, even if, of course it's subjective. You can't really say any particular musician is the best in the world because everyone has a different style, But the fact that Steve Vai even said it, I think will tell anyone that hasn't listened to Tommy Emmanuel or checked him out, will give you an idea of just how ridiculous he is. And I can attest to that, because one of the things that was a bit, it was inspiring to learn while I was touring with him, but it was also completely depressing at the same time. And that's that he has just an absolutely limitless vocabulary on the guitar. Over the years I've been playing guitar, I've got a lot of different tricks under the hood, and a reasonable vocabulary. Like if someone said, I want you to just solo playing the blues for 10 minutes, I could do it. But if you ask me to do that, the next song, and then the next song, and then the next song, even to my own ears, I'm like, yeah, you already played that one, brother. Whereas I would get to watch Tommy doing this night after night when we were on the road, and every single idea he would play would be different. He could do a 2-hour show and never repeat a lick while he's improvising. I mean, it's just, it was unbelievable to me. Right. He has, I don't know what the music equivalent of a photographic memory is, but it's almost like musically he's never forgotten any lick that he's ever played in 40, 50 years.
And able to recall it when needed.
And recall it just in the moment. And and there's very few people I've ever toured with or worked with that have that. It's really quite amazing. But the other thing about Tommy is, and this happens a lot with like any really incredible artist, is that how much is nurture and how much is nature. In other words, are they just born with this gift of being this good, and how much is actually working at it? Well, I'd have to think about what age maybe Tommy was when I was last touring with him, but the schedule was pretty grueling. He would have been over 60 for sure. And we did 3 months all around Europe, and some shows in different countries were back to back. So we were basically sleeping on the tour bus. And so, we would finish a show, have a quick shower at the venue, onto the tour bus, and we drive overnight to the next place, get there in time for lunch or sound check, do all that, do the show, and then back on the bus. And the schedule was more or less that for the 3 months. There was a couple of days in between where we would maybe check into a hotel if we had a day off. But the thing that I can tell you about Tommy, sorry, I know I'm rambling, but I'm getting to a point, is that what I got to witness firsthand is that he just never puts the guitar down, never. Right. And even after being a touring and recording artist for, really, since he was a kid, it would be understandable and excusable even if you're in your 60s and you basically just played guitar at soundcheck in the show and you really had your bag of tricks pretty well established, right? But Tommy, his passion and joy for the instrument,
just because he seems like he's still completely passionate about it.
Correct. And so to give you a quick overview of like a day in the life of Tommy and how much he plays the guitar, and then this would happen every single day on the tour. So if you were asleep in the tour bus and sun was coming up and it's say 6 or 7 a.m. and most people are still asleep in their bunks, the coffins we call them, because they're so small that if you've got to lie straight and the roof above your bunk is 6 inches from your nose, and so you would hear acoustic guitar in the back lounge part of the tour bus. So this would happen. He's a pretty early riser, so you'd smell the coffee and hear acoustic guitar playing at about 7 a.m., even if you only went to bed at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m.
Sure.
He would be noodling on the guitar on the acoustic and playing pretty much all the way until we would arrive at the next city, which would, generally be around, say, midday or just after. Then we would freshen up and then we would do the sound check, which would maybe go for an hour and a half or something. Then he would do a meet and greet, and he would do this at every city that we went to. A meet and greet with maybe 20 or so guitarists that had, say, won competitions on the radio and things like that. He would sit with them. They'd all bring their acoustic guitars, and he would sit kind of almost doing like an impromptu workshop for about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. Then he would have a shower and have dinner after that. And then he'd be in his dressing room playing acoustic guitar after all of that, pretty much right up until the show. Then we would do a 2-hour show, finish at 10:30 p.m., say, have a shower, back on the tour bus, and that acoustic guitar is still straight out of its case on the tour bus until about 1 a.m. And that happened every day. So, and that's, for a guy that's in his, like I said before, like in his 60s, and he's been doing it since he was 6 years old, you would be forgiven for him not wanting to touch the guitar while he's on the tour bus. Because, I didn't most of the days. I was like, no, I'm going to be playing all afternoon and all evening. That's enough,
Sure.
But
I get it.
So there you go. So that's
because, let's be honest, every time you ever saw an interview with Eddie, he was sitting there with an unplugged electric noodling away all the time.
I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously without knowing firsthand, but my impression of Eddie is that he was the same way. There was just always a guitar lying around. He was always noodling on it, always coming up with some new idea. Tommy Wood, he has epitomized so many great techniques on both electric and acoustic guitar. But he would sometimes go, he used to call me Simey Boy. So, hey, Simey Boy, come over here. What do you think of this? I think I've invented a new thing. And he would show me some crazy little flurry with like using harmonics with the right hand and stuff on his acoustic guitar. And I'd be like, oh my God, he's still coming up with stuff. But like, as if he was 10 years old discovering finger tapping,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, touring with Tommy, that's what I mean when I say it both at the same time inspiring and depressing, because I thought, man, I don't feel like playing that much guitar while I'm touring now, let alone when I'm in my 60s, Right. But so people about Tommy will often ask me like, how good is he, and how much is a gift? Obviously, I think you're born with that passion and joy for music, or you wouldn't spend that many hours. That's true. I mean, he probably put his 10,000 hours in the first 2 years of his life,
Right.
So,
I hear that. So yeah, helping in Corey's Garden and Ian's Guitar Shack. Saw them pop on in here. I'm seeing lots of love in the chat for Tommy, of course. There's Mark Severson's here. Welcome, Mark. Let's see here. Donnie asked, the voice of Cornhole, what was one of the places that you played that blew you away and would go back again to play?
That's a good question. I think, I mean, I've been lucky enough I did a tour back in the day with an Australian band called Taxi Ride. And because of the shared record company, they picked up a tour supporting Tina Turner on her last world tour all around Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were playing the size venues that Tina was booking, and they were all stadiums. So, for example, in the UK, we played Wembley. Everything was that size. And I think before I started playing venues that were that big, I mean, of course, we realized we were the opening band. So we knew that all these people streaming in, tens of thousands of people, were not there to see us. But I thought I would still be extra nervous and get a real kick out of playing to that many people. But the truth is, I think because I grew up playing in clubs, there's something about the intimacy of a slightly smaller venue that I like more. So
Sure.
my most memorable gigs are usually like, I guess what would you call like 1,000 capacity person club, like a medium-sized club?
Or a theater at that point.
Yeah.
You're getting a theater.
But the ones I like the best, the theaters are almost always seated, of course, but my favorites are the ones where it's like a standing pub, you know, or maybe a showroom where it's standing at the front, and then you have some tiered levels at the back where there's high tables and stuff like that. But my most memorable gigs are the ones in those kind of places where it's packed, and it might be like 1,000 people or something, and it's just the vibe in the room is great. Everyone's having a good time, and because the people in the front row are right up next to you. You can see everybody's faces, and so I'd say of the different types of gigs that I end up doing, those ones are the ones I like the most. It gets over a size where it starts to feel less personal from the stage. You know, you've got the punter barriers that are set back so the security can be in there, and everything just starts feeling a bit more disconnected. But yeah.
I saw John ZD351 said he had a songbook of Tommy's signed by Tommy, and Tommy's comment was, "I'm sure you play these better than me." He said, which was utter bullshit, but sure.
I actually have Tommy's Maton acoustic guitar that they built for him back in 95. And at the time that I was touring with him around then, the steel string acoustic guitar I had was not very good. And so he said to me, look, if you're going to be touring with me, I can't have you using that thing on the stage. And I went, oh, okay, well, I'll look around and get something else. And he said, no. Come around to my house tomorrow for a cuppa, and you know, you can have a look at what acoustics I've got lying around in the house and just choose the one you like the best, and you can use that for the tour. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I went round. He had about I think 4 or 5 different types of acoustic guitars lying on his couch, and so I played each one. And the one I picked is one of the ones that he's sort of quite famous for playing, which is a slightly smaller bodied Maton acoustic guitar. And it was great. So I used it for the tour, and and then once the tour had finished and we got back home to Melbourne, and Tommy lives in Nashville now, but at the time he lived in Melbourne. And I was entertaining my partner one early Sunday morning. We'd been up all night, and I think we had some music playing or something. Anyway, there's a knock at the door, and I'm still in my dressing gown. And I go up and look through the peephole, and it's Tommy standing there. And I'm like, oh. And if it was anyone else, of course, I just would have ignored it. But I said, well, you know, we better do a quick tidy up of the lounge room, and you know, you can go into another room or something. So I better answer this. So I'm standing there in my dressing gown at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and open the door, and Tommy says, look, I've got a present for you. And I was like, oh, what's that? And he showed me an acoustic guitar case. And I thought he just brought round, and being stupid, and probably because I hadn't slept that night, brought round an acoustic guitar case to put whatever acoustic I was going to buy in, you know.
Right.
And so I took it off him and said, thanks. He goes, look, I won't keep you. I can hear that you're busy. But he goes, well, open the case. And I went, oh, okay. And I opened it, and it was the guitar that I'd chosen that I used on the tour. And so he just gifted it to me. And that's still one of my main acoustics that I play to this day.
Sure.
But, yeah.
They're great guitars.
Yeah, it's a killer sounding acoustic. It's because it's slightly smaller bodied. It's got a really, really nice mid-range to it. So especially if the acoustic guitar is sort of front and center and featuring, it's killer.
Right.
Yeah,
perfect.
Sounds great.
And welcome to all that are joining in, but throwing your names up there on the screen, because we don't want to interrupt. So appreciate everyone joining in. And again, if you have any questions for either of us, ask away. Why do I have blood on me? Oh, that's nice.
Do you say blood?
Yeah, a mosquito bite got me, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
Deuce. All right. It's gone now. Well, that's a first on the channel. I was like, I don't recall doing heroin. It's like it was right there. Anyways, yeah, welcome all coming in. Scott Brockway and John Duchesne and Aaron from Albus Band, which I think Aaron, October 27th, Aaron will be coming on. We briefly talked about it FaceTiming the other day. Aaron, are you able to do the 27th? You can tell us in the chat. Next week, we're doing a group hang for Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving. And then the week after that, we have Sean Pierce Johnson joining us. So that'll be a bunch of fun. Unbelievable asks, what gear are you currently touring with?
That's a good question because it depends on the tour. But my main pedal board that I'm using now, that's sort of my Swiss Army knife, if you like. So it'll do most things without too much modification, is pretty simple. I'm using the Friedman IRX as the preamp, which is good, and that sounds great. I run into a Honeycomb compressor, which I have. That's sort of first in the chain. Mm-hmm. And I've got it set really, really gentle, to be honest. It's not really, the dry wet mix is about, I'd say 75% dry. So it's really just giving me a little tiny bit of extra sustain and just some volume evening, but it's pretty subtle. Then from that, I run into the Friedman IRX. Right. Then out of that, I'm running into a Source Audio EQ2 pedal, which is their digital graphic programmable EQ. You can have 4 presets.
Nice.
And that's awesome because depending on if I'm using my pedal board to run into the effects returns of, say, Marshall heads and using them as power amps, or whether I'm going direct into a DI and using in-ears, obviously the tone sounds slightly different. So the EQ pedal is really just there as a utility thing, so I can kind of shape the final guitar tone a little bit. Like sometimes when you run a preamp into the back of Marshall heads, depending on the condition of the backline amps, it can be a little woofy in the bottom end. Mm-hmm. So I use the EQ pedal just to tame a bit of that. And then out of there, I'm running into, actually, for the in-ear stuff, I've got a couple of little tricks. I'm running the rig in stereo for most people I'm touring with. So out of the Friedman IRX, I'm running into the TC Electronic Flashback 2 delay pedal. Right. And what I'm doing with that is a tiny bit of slapback delay, but in stereo. So I think one side's roughly about 70 or 80 milliseconds, and the other side's more like 100. So they're slightly different times.
I like it.
But the effect level is down pretty low. And all I'm using that for is so that if I'm using in-ears, that the guitar sounds not super, super dry in my ears, which I hate. So it makes it sound a little bit like, if you're sitting in front of your amp in your bedroom or your studio or in the house, it's got a tiny bit of that room reflection sound. Mm-hmm. So I'm just using it for that. And then out of that, I run into the TC Electronic Mimic pedal. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's a really cool, relatively new pedal that does automatic double tracking and panning. So So for example, with the Bon Jovi thing, because I'm the only guitarist, but all of those classic Bon Jovi hits were double tracked and panned. So that means that for the front of house guy and for all of our ears, it sounds like I've double tracked myself.
Right.
In one in the left and one in the right. And it sounds great. They're using some tricky new algorithm that apparently I was reading about it, that they sampled a bunch of session guitarists in, I think some in LA and some in New York. And what they analyzed the difference in timing movements of each guitarist double track to themselves.
Right.
And then they built that into the algorithm. So it's not a straight offset delay.
Right. Right. I remember there was another company that did a similar way. It might have even been them too. You could do almost up to 4 guitar parts, and it literally had basically a sloppy knob to how wide you wanted that delay to be.
Yeah, that's really right. Yeah, there is some settings on the pedal that you can muck with. So I just use it in its most basic mode, which is 1 double track, and with there's a knob on it that says tight, so you can choose whether you want your double track to yourself to be tight or loose.
Right.
I kind of keep it on tight just because otherwise it sounds awesome on loose, but then it's very obvious to anyone in there that's say a musician in the audience that there's something funny going on with your trickery,
Right.
Whereas tight, it almost sounds like you've just got an Eventide on your pedal board. And then out of that, I'm running into the Boss SD 3000 dual delay, just for a bit of simple delays, and that's it. That's pretty much the rig. And then I've got a couple of blank spots on the board reserved for if I'm doing a particular show with someone that requires maybe a specific type of chorus pedal, or a vibrato, or a tremolo, or any of those other modulating kind of things.
Right.
Then I sort of pull them on and off as needed. So that's about it. The good thing with the Friedman IRX is just in the last 3 months, I've had to do, so for example, my gigs with Daryl Braithwaite is all in-ears, no amps on stage,
right?
Which means that I obviously need the power amp sim and the cab sim from the back end of the IRX.
Sure.
Whereas with the Bon Jovi thing, we do use Marshalls on stage. So I don't need the cab sim. So the cool thing with the IRX is you can just bypass the cab sim and then all of a sudden run into a couple of amps, but it doesn't change any of your other settings. And that's very, very, very flexible. It's great.
That is. Yeah, I like that a lot. Excuse me. What's up, Mark Taft? Coots 13 in the house. Lots of people. I love it. Good crowd here. I was going to say, now for the Bon Jovi tribute, was there a talk box used?
Yes, I bought the MXR, make a new sort of version.
Right.
I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but essentially it works the same way, except for that you don't actually need to take the speaker output jack of your amp now to run it out to the talk box. So I would run that last in the chain after my pedal board. Sure. And then it's got a tiny little speaker in the pedal itself that is pushing the sound up the tube.
Okay, I was wondering how that worked exactly.
Yeah, that's how they've done the workaround, so you don't need to use your speaker signal.
See, now I need a talk box too.
It's really cool, and it's actually not that expensive. I think I'm trying to remember what I paid in Australian dollars. Maybe like 350 or something, which I guess in Canadian dollars would probably only be about 250.
We're fairly close, I think, as far as exchange.
Oh, we are. So maybe 300 then. Yeah. But so the MXR talk box is cool because you still have to use the tube. You still need the second microphone and all of that. But it just means that you don't have to mess around with speaker signals.
Like my personal thing. If I go into any place and I look up on stage and I see that tube attached to a microphone, I know my night got better because I know at some point. And I thought about doing that, just putting a tube on my mic stand, not having a talk box on my rig or anything, but just for that visual that guy's got a talk box. Nope.
Yeah.
I just did that. Get your hopes up.
I must admit, that is one of those things that, because Bon Jovi fans are so loyal and, know obviously a lot about the band, they know those things. Even the non-musicians, like, they know that Richie has that tube that goes up one of the mic stands. Mm-hmm. They're the things that they look for. And so what we wanted to do was make sure that before we even played a note, when they walked in the room, they saw a big drum kit, they saw two Marshalls on the stage, they saw the tube going up the mic stand. And so, I mean, I just think I know for me as a punter, if I go to see a band and I notice things like that, I'm already excited before they've played the downbeat, And I just think that makes a big difference. So yeah, it's been fun using it. It's a cool little toy for sure. I've used one before. I've used a real one before in the studio. Mm-hmm. And those real ones, if you're using the speaker signal from a Marshall head, boy, do they rattle your teeth. They're crazy. The cool thing about the MXR one is you can actually set the volume level of the speaker coming through the tube. So if you don't want your teeth, if you don't want your teeth rattled, you don't have to. But yeah, pretty cool.
Nice. Charles75N asks, Ben, yes. Who would Simon really like to play with that he has not been able to play with yet?
Alex Van Halen would be cool. No, I'm kidding. I think we all know that it doesn't seem like Alex is wanting to play with anyone anymore. He's sold off all his stuff and all of that. But as far as artists, I don't know. I have to be honest, it's not something that I really think about that much. And I guess the reason that I don't think about it over the years is because there's very little that you can do about it, usually. Let me think. Who would I like to play with? I mean, a massive kick for me, and this would probably go without saying, and I'm sure it'd be the same for all of us. I'd love to even just have a jam with Michael Anthony, even if it had nothing to do with that Sammy wasn't involved or anyone else, just particularly Michael Anthony himself. I just think that would be that would be an amazing thing. I don't know if that would ever happen one day or what the circumstance of that could ever be, but but as far as recording artists, I don't know. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head.
What's up, Hobo Roadie? Graphite and Cigars says, last year you did Trilogy. Any projects like that coming up we can look forward to? Ooh.
Yeah. So the Malmsteen Trilogy thing I did for the Melbourne Guitar Show, they've been pretty good actually with me over the years, because we seem to have stumbled onto a theme now where whenever they ask me to do something, it tends to now be somebody's album in track order,
Sure.
So, hey, Ryan. Yeah, so what would be next? I don't know. Actually, one of the things I've been talking to a great drummer here in Melbourne about is back in the day, in the sort of mid-90s, with Virgil Donati, we did a Dream Theater tribute show that we just called Theater of Dreams. And we pretty much only we never really toured it. We would just do gigs in Melbourne. But apparently the Dream Theater guys, when they were on the tour bus, one of the things they used to do to entertain themselves is they would get VHS tapes of all the different Dream Theater tribute bands around the world and watch them,
Nice.
And apparently they came across ours. And so they knew of Virgil Donati, and they'd seen us doing the thing. I mean, we were really lucky because we just had the most incredible lead singer, a guy called Andrew Grant, who there's actually a bootleg of it on my YouTube channel if anyone's curious to hear what it sounded like. But we had a lot of fun doing that. And then in '96, Mike Portnoy came out to Melbourne to headline a big Drummers Weekend festival that would get put on every year. And at the time, he wasn't touring with, his other bandmates in Dream Theater. So he booked us to do a whole Dream Theater show with him. And that was wild. That was heaps of fun. I've got a snippet of that. I mean, the video quality is low, but I've got a snippet of that on my YouTube channel as well. But So as far as projects, I don't know. There's something been niggling at me recently to put back together a Dream Theater thing, because some of those songs, especially on the early records like Images and Words and Awaken, I really think some of those are really well written songs, and they're super fun to play. The problem with that obviously is always finding other band members that have got the time to do it and the time to put into working up and memorizing all those songs, but that can play that stuff as well. But yeah, so maybe something like that, but I don't know. The Melbourne Guitar Show is coming up again at the start of March, and I've been thinking what I might do for that, and I might do something like maybe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien album, and to play the whole record, something like that. Yeah, which I think would be lots of fun.
I think so.
But I haven't decided all that yet. Actually, I can see John ZD351's asking that there is another covers concept that I had, really just to probably have some fun whenever we're all here back in Melbourne, which is a cover band doing a combination of Extreme songs and Mr. Big songs. Ooh. And we would just call the band Extremely Big, because why not? And I love it. Yeah, and I think that would be super fun. So if we did do that, I would 100% video and record some of that show and, put it up on socials. Why not?
That would be cool. Let's see here. Scott Brockway, he had asked a couple of times now, so he asked if you've ever met or worked with Bob Daisley at all.
Bob Daisley? No, I haven't, I don't think, Scott. Sorry.
Good question, though. I like it. Ronnie says Satriani would be fun too. Sure.
Yeah. I think it would. And I think for me, if I was going to pick any album of Satriani's, that Surfing with the Alien one is so iconic, you know? So I think it would make sense to do that. And then maybe for
the non-Satch fans know, basically.
Yeah, that's right. I think that so, and because at these sort of guitar show type gigs, there's a lot of guitarists there, of course, but there's also a lot of just people's partners and stuff like that. So I think it makes sense for it to be an album that's easy to listen to, and maybe like slightly more on the commercial side for even just the people that are curious, like the jazz guitarists that have probably never heard Satriani, and that are just interested in what it is. So, I mean, one thing
Ice 9 in the encore. Very easy, John.
Well, I think that, yes, Ice 9 in the encore is a great idea. And I think another really great song to put in the encore would be Flying in a Blue Dream or something like that. It's such a great song. But
Roddy says, what's that the one he recorded when he had hair? Yes.
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
John says, I'll be there. Stage beers on me.
All right. Beautiful.
Especially
Thanks.
If you mostly vibrate off the amp, they'll literally be on you, John.
Yeah. Hey, Ben Tom, how you doing, brother? Good to see you. Mystical Potato Head Groove thing would be cool too. See, this is the thing. Some of that Satch stuff from back around that era, there's so many good songs to play that, because sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. The Surfing with the Alien record would really only go for, I mean, if I would probably stretch out some of the songs a bit and not play them like, because, a lot of them are pretty short. They're like 3 minutes something, and then they fade out. I'd probably stretch them out. But even still, playing that album would probably only take 45 minutes. So you would definitely need to hand pick a couple of other songs to do as an encore, just to fill an hour, I would think.
Sure.
But it would be fun, that's for sure.
What did I see here? Hip Metalwork says, we used to open with Flying. Everyone listens after that.
Yeah, I agree. I remember the first time I heard that song and I just went, wow, what an opening to an album. Just such a killer song. Really is.
Speaking of combos, Jimmy Ray Hawkins says, Satch Surfing plus DLR size skyscraper. Combo-tastic deluxe.
That would be. Although if I was going to do some DLR, I think I would do Eat 'em and Smile, probably.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you get to do Talking with just a wah, just to up the game.
That's right.
Steve Vaughn, like, I don't need any tube. I just use my wah. I was like, all right,
exactly.
Easy.
Exactly. But yeah, actually, Unfuckable Believable says The Extremist. Yeah, I really like The Extremist record. I really did. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't make sense to play a whole record the way I did with Van Halen and Malmsteen. Maybe with Satriani, it just makes more sense to just play an hour of cool Satch tracks or something. I don't know. But...
Well, thank you, Terry, for putting links to Haas's stuff in the chat there.
Yeah.
Check it out, folks.
Thank you so much. Hey, Terry.
On the socials. John says, I saw Satch on the Blue Dream Tour at Festival Hall with the brilliant Jimmy Hawking as support.
Yeah, John, I was at that gig as well. So we didn't know each other then, but that's funny. We're probably standing side by side.
Right. I remember that. It was like the first time you were on. John's like, did you used to gig at this one bar? And you're like, yeah. He's like, did you play with these guys? Yeah. And it's like small world.
It's a really small world. Yeah, for sure.
Which I love that.
Yeah.
Some great questions and comments coming in here, folks. I really dig it. We got 75 people watching. If you haven't already, please hit the like. And, of course, subscribe if you're new. We're closing in on 6,000 subscribers. Oof. See, Lawrence from Alaska's here. Awesome. Yedamedsi's background. Magic Man, full circle with the screen name.
I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, everyone. So apologies, though, if I'm missing some questions. So if I miss something, just please ask it again. And
ask again, please. Yeah. Lawrence says, one of my oldest guitars is 01 JS1000, metallic gray S series with PF and Fred pickups. I may try his hotter set. I did an import version of it. It's just a JS100. It was in used at the local music store. I was shocked at how well it's, and the coil tap, it was weird because I had a coil tap on the humbucker on the bridge, and in my coil tap, it had the most telly spank I've heard in years. Most non-telly shaped guitar that sounded still telly-like, and I was just like, what? It was crazy.
Hey, we got Joe Occhipinti in the chat, everyone. Joe, for anyone that doesn't know, is my incredible guitar tech that I take all my guitars to, and he's even built some for me as well. So, yeah. Hey, Joe, how you doing? Hope you're well, brother.
And Bo, I saw you asked that earlier, and we had actually discussed it before you had shown up. Yes, we discussed Leon Todd. That was one of the first questions I think we had on the night.
It was, yeah.
What's up, Dwight?
Leon's a great guy and an incredible guitar player. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Humbucker from hell in the neck. Right, exactly, Tom.
I mean, as far as the Melbourne Guitar Show goes, what a lot of people have been asking me for a long time now, which I probably should do, is maybe the Van Halen 2 record, you know?
Ooh, okay.
Maybe go back to rather than swap guitarists each time, maybe revisit that. We'll see.
What's up, Eddie? That's Eddie Van Haskell, folks. Just it's a different EVH.
Hey, Eddie.
Great to have Eddie here. He's one of the OGs of this channel. Tom says the tone on Van Halen 2 is so good. It is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think when someone's asked what album is your favorite Van Halen guitar tone, it's really hard to answer because there's something I like. They're all different, of course, but there's something I sort of like about all of them. But I would say there is something about the Van Halen 2 tone that I think resonates with me the most. I mean, I think I heard more Van Halen. I listened to Van Halen 2 when I was a kid more than Van Halen 1 even. And so I think that sound is a bit more embedded in my subconscious perhaps. But man, the sound on that record is awesome. And I know that I've heard Dave Freeman speak lots about, I think that's his favorite sounding Van Halen sound as well.
I can see that, definitely.
Yeah,
for me, it's Diver Down. And the reason that was my first exposure to Van Halen. It coincided. One of my older cousins left a copied version of Diver Down at our grandfather's place, and I'm like,
yeah.
Ooh, what's this? Plopped in the Walkman. Holy crap! This is not, what I've been listening to previously. And then the Jump video had come out right around that time, but there's no real guitar playing in it, so that was cool exposure.
I think a lot of people are saying in the chat too that it's either out of Van Halen 2 and maybe Fair Warning. I don't have to agree with that. I think if I really was forced to choose, I would pick Van Halen 2 and Fair Warning probably. I think the Van Halen 1 tone is completely unique to all the other records, and I love it for what it is. But there's something about when Eddie's sound is a bit more boxy and mid-rangey, and that it makes it sound more intimate. I think the Van Halen 1 tone is killer and it's aggressive, but it sounds less intimate than Van Halen 2 and Fair Warning. And I would say Diver Down too, Ben. The sound is a bit drier. It's maybe a little bit less distorted, and that I think that makes it sound more intimate.
And that's when we're starting to hear like an always-on chorus of some kind of modulation, always on by Diver Down.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I didn't know what he was doing at that time through the years. I just remember every album that would come out, it seemed like there was more gain and more modulation.
Yeah.
And I was like, geez, and he's just getting bigger sounds every time. And I was like, wow, okay.
I mean, look, I love the 5150 album too, but it's very, very different. And to me, I almost don't compare it to the previous 6 albums because it almost sounds like a different band, Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you do have that slight carry. Like 1984 was the first one they recorded at the home studio.
That's
but
right.
It sounds nothing like 5150. It's just like,
nothing
you got the studio open, but it's almost like you bought all new gear for the studio, like the outboard gear, because all of a sudden it was just, or it's like you brought Bob Rock in, because 5150 is just such a bigger, more produced album, for lack of a better term.
Yep. It is. It's
Milt. Yeah, thanks for the shirt, Milt. Milt T in the chats. You supplied the shirt.
Yeah. Christopher says, after Van Halen 1, we were all waiting on Van Halen 2, and that first song, You're No Good. I agree. Obviously, You're No Good is a Linda Ronstadt cover, but that is the way that they treat that song. I've always loved that as the opening to that record. I just think it's also the decision to not open the record with a ball terror, to do something that's kind of got like a laid back groove. I think it was probably bold but clever, because I love it. His guitar sound on You're No Good is just awesome. Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And that's something I always look forward to, like having that chance. It's like, okay, saving up enough money to go down to the record store to buy a Van Halen album, whether back catalog, what have you, because I discovered them in the mid 80s. And one of the things I look forward to is what cover did they do? Because they would always throw at least one cover on during the Dave years, and they always made the song their own, to the point where you're like, is it a cover?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it would be pretty hard to argue that when they did You Really Got Me, more people knew the song from Van Halen than the original, So,
right.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. All this talk about Van Halen 2 is inspired. Maybe that's the next thing that I've got to do. Maybe I need to, it's been a few years now since I did that Van Halen 1 thing.
Except on 1984, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that, because it was kind of a nod to their previous life as a cover band. Because
well, that's right. And so when people say, they played too many covers on their albums, but what you got to remember is just what you said, Ben, that for years they were a party band that would do backyard parties and play covers.
And that's what you would do. You would be a cover band that, hey, let's write a song. Okay. But it was like, and then you would transition. A lot of famous bands started as cover bands that then transitioned to original music.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Jerry says, get a Bumblebee and do it. All right. I will. I think I've been convinced. That's probably what I should do.
Now, Joseph, incoming Bumblebee for setup in the next 5 months.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
See, those early Van Halens were seasoned and spiced so well. Yeah. Great vibe and path. Yep. You know, like one song led into the other, which I can say they pretty much did that most of their career. Because I was even thinking the Sammy stuff, like 5150 flows start to finish. And OU812 as well, just off the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky because the first that I ever heard of Van Halen was not one particular record. I was 12 years old, and my guitar teacher at the time had another student that had made him a 90-minute compilation cassette, right? So I know pretty much everyone in the chat will remember those. So those cassettes were like 45 minutes each side, and it was just chock full of hand-picked Van Halen songs from each of the first 6 records, plus a couple of things off 5150. So I guess, because that would be right, because when I was 12, it was like 1986, so 5150 would have been out. So it didn't have, I never listened to the full records until maybe a couple of years later when I started going back and buying them. So, so my impression, that's why it's really hard for me to have a favorite Van Halen record, because I just heard 90 minutes of mixed Van Halen from all of those records, and I liked all the songs, you know. And I actually, when Eddie passed, I went into to my garage to find my old box of cassettes, knowing that I would have this somewhere. And of course, I'd written the names of all the songs on the cassette cover and in order, and I'd drawn the Van Halen wings on the spine. And I thought, man, if I could find that cassette, which is what really started it all for me, that would be a cool thing to actually get framed and have in the studio, you know, as one of those sentimental things from, you know, when you're in primary school. And I can't find it. I've got a really bad feeling that I did a spring clean one year, like many years ago, and came across all this old stuff. And I thought, well, I've got it all on CD. I don't need this cassette anymore, and threw it out. But anyway.
Oh, I get that.
I wish I
had it. I was saying that. You were saying, like, first exposure with a compilation. It was like similar for me with AC/DC. My first exposure to them was the Who Made Who album that a neighbor had borrowed, and then he was playing it. I'm like, I have to borrow that for an hour so I could go home, dub it, and then I brought it back to him. And I was just like, and I didn't know that it was a compilation. I was just like, wow, this is a lot of strong material. And then became an instant fan based off that. So I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. Coots says for the Roth era, Van Halen 1, for the Sammy era, the FUCK album. Yeah, I've got to say, I think my 2 favorite albums of the Sammy era would be 5150 and FUCK for sure.
I think so too.
I think that's a great record. I like it more than OU812, I think. You know,
OU812 I found was we were talking about the other night, was a little weak, and I remember like going out buying 5150 when it came out, because right around, you know, same age, and used my lawn mowing money, and then OU812 came out, and I just went, wow, this is kind of like adult contemporary. Like, that's what reminded me of, like, they were going in that Stevie Winwood direct, like as a lot of 60s and 70s artists were doing in the 80s, reinventing themselves, doing that AOR thing. And I remember the first music video, it's all in black and white in the closed bar, and I'm like, this is really having Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton vibes here. Like, what's going on? You know, Eddie's got the Frankie out for the video, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And then Finish What You Started came out, and I'm like, now I'm really scratching my head. But I dug it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, to me, it lacked a little bit of that Van Halen fire that you hear on some of the other records. And you definitely, I hear that fire on FUCK, like Judgment Day, those kind of songs, you know. OU812, to me, it's a good record. I think it sounds nice. it felt a little sanitized or pop, or maybe they were going for the radio hits a little too much, perhaps.
Because of the success from the previous album, which I get, like
I get it too.
They got so much more radio play and stuff,
and I'm sure they were probably.
Shout out JP Page 2 for the donation earlier. Thank you. It's been on my phone. I keep forgetting to mention that, so I do appreciate that. Virtual tip jar always open, folks. But like 5150, I just remember that being such a big summer album. That was part of the soundtrack of every summer for me, and not just summer nights, but like through my teen years, we'd be sitting, hanging around outside in the summertime.
Well, when I was first given that compilation cassette, that was in the summer in Melbourne, and it was a hot summer as well. And of course, I was at that age where I was very impressionable, but also, you're hitting puberty, and you're starting to be interested in girls and things. And that it was like the perfect storm for me. I was at an age to be excited about it. It was summertime. And so I would listen to tracks like Good Enough and 5150 and, the song Summer Nights. I think Get Up or something was on there too. Why can't this be the whole? So I always associate Van Halen with the summertime, which is probably perfect, obviously being a California band,
Right.
Yeah.
They say, and it was so quintessential 80s because rock was dominant through the 80s, in many ways, but so was pop. And you literally had the big guitars and Simmons drums. And it was just that synchronicity of like very, dare I say, Duran Duran-esque.
Yeah.
That meld of pop and rock together. And
I think I felt that way about it too. I think that
I just realized I compared Duran Duran and Van Halen to each other on air. Oh, well, there we go. That happened.
Yeah, I think how much was like a deliberate thought process and how much just happened naturally with. I mean, I've read that the reason that Alex started using the Simmons drums in the 5150 studio was because of space constraints and that they didn't have a great sounding drum room. So it was almost like out of what was maybe purchased originally as kind of a demoing kit, and then they realized, this has actually kind of got its own vibe. And I think what you said is right about it still had a rock sensibility, but with the electronic drums and some of the keyboards, it did sound like it fitted in with that era of 80s music. It wasn't like, say, for example, a band like AC/DC, which just always kind of keeps to its roots of the 70s.
Yeah.
Exactly. Duran Duran.
When you buy an AC/DC album, you know what you're getting.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. There's going to be no surprises. No surprises. No. Yeah, that's right. And
possibly, you're like a couple albums in the 80s. You're like one song. You're like, is there a bit of a chorus on someone's guitar track? Or you put on "Fly on the Wall" and you're like, why is there slapback on everything?
Yeah.
And because I revisited the "Fly on the Wall" album not too long ago, and I always thought it was mixed so terrible because the vocals were mixed low, and I'm listening to it. And everything's got a slapback on it. I'm like, who produced this abomination? And I flip it over. Produced by Malcolm and Angus Young. I'm like, God bless them. They tried.
Yeah. The fact that each Van Halen album sounds different, I think, is part of the band's strength. I mean, look, all these years later, we're all still discussing which is the best album for the songs, which is the best one for his guitar sound, which is the album had the best Alex Van Halen drum sound. But the truth
there was
is
Michael Anthony just consistently throughout.
Yeah. That's right.
It's like a great referee in a sporting match. If they do a great job, nobody even knows who the ref was. And that's how Mike was.
But I imagine if I was a little bit older than I am and I was buying the Van Halen albums as they came out, what would have been awesome is you would never have known what you were about to get when you dropped the needle.
Right.
Because each album, and I think that's an awesome thing for a band to give its fans, is that little bit of surprise.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Rush album. With Rush, you kind of know what you're going to get, but you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You're going to be impressed. And you're like, well, I didn't see that coming. But sure.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Exactly.
Tom says, I wonder if in 20 or 40 years we'll see guitar modelers the same way as a lot of people see Simmons drums now. Well, maybe. I don't know. Do we look at Rockmans that way? Because that's kind of like a Rockman was your first kind of little modeler in many ways. That was used widely throughout music. You know, everyone. I think a lot of guys went through the Rockman phase in the 80s. That's for sure.
Absolutely, they did. Yeah. And you know, for the relatively simple and new technology that it was back then, I mean, a lot of albums were recorded with that guitar sound.
Mm-hmm. So true. What's up, Blue Mox?
Yeah.
Was Terry's like, it's like I say, I'm not an EVH fan, but I do appreciate VH songs. Grudgingly, I'm like, I'm not a Van Halen fanboy. There's lots of them out there, and that's fine. I'm not. And then I realized how much he has crept into my playing, because I love his riffs. You know, riff-based rock. You know, he really embraced that, and yet it's not overly complicated compared to other guitar players because he was still much more blues-based, and he's not adding in. You know, it's not like Yngwie with some classical-based scale. Eddie's like, I just rock the piss out of a pentatonic half the time. And you're like, perfect. And then, you know, and doing that Jimmy Page major minor thing, which was always awesome. And
yeah. I mean, I think that obviously because of some of Eddie's classical piano upbringing, there's some sprinkles of classical music, but it's not like minor harmonic classical like Yngwie was. It's actually almost like more happy major stuff, like, for example, what Mozart was.
Right.
You know, so I think of Eddie and Yngwie as complete polar opposites in the sense that, it would be fun to do, you know, like a chart of a side-by-side in which way that they're complete opposites in every different element. But an obvious one is, I think Eddie's guitar playing is definitely at its core 80% blues-based with maybe 20% of some Mozart and stuff like that. Like, so, you know, for example, his finger tapping chord movements, that harmonically, that is more classical than blues. But then when he rips a lick, it's obviously the blues. Malmsteen is like 80%, you know, classical music, but the more darker minor version, like more like Bach, not really like Mozart, you know.
Well, but then you know who studied at the feet of Clapton and who studied at the feet of Blackmore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But Yngwie still does have that 20% that is kind of Blackmore and Hendrix, right? Yeah. Not Hendrix, sorry. No, who am I thinking of? Blackmore and I can't remember the other guy. But so he does have a sprinkle of that in there. And so, and you know, Yngwie would be always scowling and frowning and wearing his tie. Yeah, and wearing his black leather. Eddie's in pink parachute pants and a white.
Eddie is humble about his playing. Yngwie can't stop talking about his playing.
That's right. Yngwie thinks he invented the planet Earth, whereas Eddie doesn't even think he revolutionized guitar, you know?
Right. So he's like, he's like, I just stole everything from Clapton. You're like, no, he didn't.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, yeah, they're, and when I was young, I mean, because I grew up playing classical guitar, so I didn't even touch an electric guitar for 6 years after starting playing. So there was something in my ears about that I did respond to when I first heard Malmsteen, which was maybe a year or so later than I heard Van Halen. Mm-hmm. And I thought, ooh, this is interesting. This sounds like all the classical guitar stuff I've been playing, but turned up to 11, you know?
Right.
And so they were always like, the way I kind of look at their influences on me is like I've got like those old Warner Brothers cartoons where you've got the devil and the angel on each shoulder arguing with each other. You know, and I always thought of Yngwie and Eddie like that. But, yeah.
Billy Balloon says, Yngwie's way better than Eddie. Just ask him.
Exactly.
But, yeah, exactly. Scott, they're all amazing in different ways, too. And that's the funny thing. It's like, music isn't a competition. It's art.
No, it's not.
But on the other hand, you can go, wow, that guy is definitely a better player than that guy. Like there's that too. So
I think that happens. I think you're right, Ben. I think that happens like up to a point as the musicians get better and better. I think lower down, it's more easier to hear, yeah, that guy's clearly better than that guy. But then once you get up to like that top 30% of artists, then it really just becomes subjective because they play differently, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why, yeah, you can do a top 25 guitar players and there's no wrong order, type thing. They're all tied for first.
Yeah, although I would say from over the last few years, those Rolling Stone top 100 of this and top 100 of that, I almost strongly disagree with each one they've done. I'm just like, what? I don't know if you feel the same way, but I just think some of those.
I do.
I know Rick Beato had a massive rant on one of them, and he was like, how can you put this person 10 spots above this person,
Yeah. Well, we had that. I remember Timothy was like top Canadian guitarists, and they had Neil Young at the top. Now, I love Neil Young to death. I think he's an amazing songwriter. But the man cannot play or sing to save his life. He sings and plays off key on purpose. So, not the best. Not the best.
Yes, so you would call, okay, right. So, but I would put someone like Neil Young in a different category then. It doesn't make him worse, but, he's a storyteller. He's a balladeer. Like he's more like one of those kind of guys.
Well, that's like the brilliance of Steve Jones and the Sex Pistols. You can't compare that with Eddie. It's completely different, but they both excelled at what they did in their specific genre per se. But with all these great guitar players, I'm thinking like let's call it shredders. Most of them, like someone said, I can't listen to more than one or two songs of Yngwie back to back, but like. I'm not into that stuff at all because I'm largely a Ronnie Wood influence player, very bluesy, and Rick Richards from the Georgia Satellites and stuff. But I can listen to Eddie Van Halen for an hour or two, no problem.
Yeah, same.
Like even Eruption reminds me of a quote unquote like a live guitar solo, like a drum solo. It has ebbs and flows. It's just not like a drag car, just 100 miles an hour out of the gate and just full blast. No, you gotta tell a story with the solo, folks.
Yes, it has phrasing, it has shape. I would say I agree with that. Even though Yngwie was somewhat of an influence when I was a young teenager, just because I loved the aggression and the speed and the classical thing like we just discussed. But really, I'll stop listening to Yngwie much quicker than I'll stop listening to Van Halen if I've got a playlist on.
Yep.
And I think that's just simply because Eddie was clearly about the song more than he was about the guitar solo. Whereas I think for Yngwie, the song is the vessel for the guitar solo.
Yeah.
I think some of Yngwie's
this one. He says, "When's the last time you heard someone humming an Yngwie song?" The last time I heard Yngwie or song.
Well, I will say this. I think on some of his earlier records, I think there is actually some really good songs on there. Like, for example, on his Odyssey record, there's a ballad called Dreaming. Now, I think that's a beautiful song that with the kind of melody, you could almost hear Sammy Hagar singing. It's very pop/classical or whatever. But yes, in general, I would agree.
I can agree with that. Like Nuno has just that little bit more to my taste. Like
me too. So
not all the licks, but again, he'll tell a story. That's for sure.
Well, I think that you've got your late 70s, early 80s guitar gods, say Eddie, Yngwie, right? And then you've got your middle 80s, like the next line of people coming through. Now, of those people, I have to say the one that excited me the most by far was Nuno.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he had, you could hear the fire in his belly, like he had passion, but he also picked with aggression. That
was Warren DeMartini for me. Right.
Love Warren's playing too. I think that I think Nuno also came from the school of make the song great, and then the guitar solo can be as awesome as you want. But if the song isn't there to support it, because and I really like, I've always liked funk music as well. In fact, for many years in Melbourne, I played in an Earth, Wind and Fire tribute show, which was heaps of fun. And and I heard Nuno, I think, as a sort of a combination of Eddie, like I could hear the Eddie influence, but then mixed with all this funk, almost James Brown style kind of funk guitar licks. And when you put Eddie and funk together, you kind of get Nuno, you know. It's and I love that about Nuno for sure.
So Joe Alba mentioned Paul Gilbert. Yeah, again, Paul. It's weird how right there, like basically one of the OGs, and just, you know, other than the commercial success of Mr. Big being his most commercial stuff, yeah, which ironically their biggest hit being a ballad of all things. But what an awesome, tasteful little shreddy solo on an acoustic, in the ballad. Which I just like. I dig it, you know. And plus, Paul is such a nice guy too. Yeah.
Paul,
we got to meet him at the last NAMM show I was at, and
he was a sweetheart.
He was. He's like, I'm really busy. I'm like, I'd love to talk to you for a minute. He goes, walk and talk, and I could barely keep up, but he did give me his guitar pick.
Oh, cool. That's excellent. Yeah, I
50, Simon, a 50.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. There you go.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, look, I love Paul's playing too, and as a budding young rock guitarist, I checked out all his intense rock videos. You know, there's not Starlicks, whatever they were, but and I liked the Racer X stuff. It took me a while to warm to Racer X because maybe I felt when I was first bought those vinyl records, maybe the songs weren't quite there. But I love the shreddiness of it, of course, and you know, I think the songs that he's written with Mr. Big are great. I've actually, so the front of house guy that was just recently doing the Best of All Worlds tour, Ace Baker, also is the front of house guy for some other things like Dream Theater. But where I met him and became good friends with him was the last couple of Colin Hay / Men at Work tours I did. Ace Baker was the sound guy for that. And we became really good friends. And so each time that Colin would fly me over to the States to begin his next tour, Ace would have some new little present for me that he'd kind of, well, maybe secretly or not so secretly, I don't know, but he would always have some present for me. And one year he said, he calls me Pally Wally, and he'd say, "Hey, Pally Wally, I've got something for you you're going to love." And he gave me from a Mr. Big gig, Paul's dowel, his drill bit with his 3 picks on it with the little screw system and everything. So I've still got that sitting in my studio. And those picks are actually very light. Yeah, they're really, really light picks. But yeah, I should do a video on that one day because I went and bought on eBay the old Makita drills that they used to use.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a particular model. They don't build them anymore because now they have, I forget what the term is. It's like an automatic clutch or something so that when you take your finger off the trigger, the drill instantly stops.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas with the old 80s ones, it didn't. It would actually wind down. So that's how you would get that like that. Whereas now they just go whoop. And so I found some of those that were in working order, and I've painted them and done all these stupid things that you do when you go down the rabbit hole and have too much time.
Brushless. Thank you, Donnie.
Yeah, brushless. Yep. Yeah, but it was cool. So Ace gave me the Paul Gilbert's actual drill bit to stick into it. So yeah, I'll have to have some fun with that one day.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go a few more minutes here, folks. And this has been a great hang and some great questions and content here, folks, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ben.
There's some
thanks
good players too, Scott. Yeah, Brad Gillis, Carlos Cavazzo, and Randy Rhodes. I saw Carlos in what was it? There's a Charvel guitar documentary on YouTube. Somebody uploaded it recently, and Carlos was sitting there with the classical guitar, slaying, just like with the four fingers going. I'm like, easy there, four fingers, you know.
Yeah.
And just, oh yeah, and I think he starts talking while he's playing. I'm like, stop, just stop.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, it looks like Carlos, but I'm not sure. And then put up his name, which was great. That's a good mini doc, but also, and Randy Rhoads, of course, too. Yes, hell of a monster player. Unbelievable. Your current practice routine.
It varies from month to month. I don't tend to have like a rigid thing that I've been doing for years. So one of the things that I did learn to do, though, that I learned just by trial and error and screwing it up. And sometimes what I used to do is think that I needed to warm up and practice by doing the things that are hardest for me to do, which makes logical sense, except for I found that if your fingers aren't properly warmed up and there's not enough blood flow in them, I'd actually hurt, especially like, I don't know if anyone's experienced a little pain in the knuckle of your ring finger.
Okay.
But I used to get a weird little tendon pain in there or something, and I realized it was because I was just going too hard out of the gate. So what I do now, I guess there's two questions to it. There's practice routine and warm-up routine.
Right.
A warm-up routine, I always start gentle now because I did have some of those finger issues. And when I would get them, they would literally last for like 2 weeks. And I'm so afraid of that now. And especially as I've got older, I realized that my fingers have, like, I don't want it to be an early sign of some kind of weird arthritis or something like that. So I think warming up gently to begin with, for at least the first 10, 15 minutes is smart. So that's what I do now. And you can buy from pharmacies and drugstores and stuff, the hand warmers now. And Ben, you would know about these living where you live, right? And they're useful too. Like if you're out doing an outdoor gig and it's cold and you don't really get that much time to warm up properly because there's other bands on the stage or whatever the thing is, those hand warmers are great because they just get the fingers loose and some blood flow.
Yep.
But so what I'll tend to do is play an assortment. I'll warm up with an assortment of licks from all different guitarists. So some might be an Eddie lick, some might be a Malmsteen lick, but I'll start slow. I'll never start them at full speed.
Right.
And when I say slow, I mean like at no more than half speed or even slower sometimes, because what I want to do in that first 10 or 15 minutes is just get the muscles, especially if I haven't played guitar all day up to that point.
Right.
I will just gently warm up, and then I'll even do some chordal stuff. And so, for example, there's a couple of chord Alan Holdsworth tunes that I used to play that don't involve any Alan Holdsworth shredding. They're just chord shapes, but his stretch is so unusual that I find them tricky. So I'll even stretch the fingers with some of that. I tend not to use exercises. And when I say exercises, I mean, we've all done that thing where you do like one finger per fret and you go da 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 up the.
I haven't done that in years.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot, thinking that was like. But the problem is, no one plays those licks on a guitar. They're not.
You're never playing chromatically,
right? So
I found one of them. I wear a compression gloves as well.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of hand problems. Much better this year than last year. That's the other way. As soon as I look, there it is, right on top. So they weren't cheap. Bought them at the drugstore. But the hand warmers, Mr. BHB Jr., Bruce in the chat, he bought me a pair of hand warmers last year as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, they're any little hacks like hand warmers and stuff that you can use that help is always good, because warming up when your hands are cold, like they're even cold to touch, will take twice as long. And it's easy to have a little muscle twinge or a little tendon twinge. So warm hands. And then I just I'll have like a list of go-to warm-up licks, but they will be actual guitar licks from guitarists. So whether it's a Clapton lick, an Eddie lick, a Malmsteen lick, Alan Holdsworth chord, I like using things that I know that a guitarist would have to play, because I feel like the movements of your fingers are a bit more realistic. I'm actually thinking of, I've had a lot of students ask me that, can you please put your warm-up routine, even if it changes from month to month, put it up each month like what your 30-minute warm-up is. And so I'm going to do that. Like I'm going to do a series of them over the next month or two. So, but I'll stick them up on my socials. So I think that's a good idea, because everyone's warm-up routine is different and it won't work the same for everyone. But I'd like to stress that you don't have to be able to play Eddie or Malmsteen at full speed. I use these licks at 50% speed, but just to warm up, you know. And I find that if I warm up for long enough playing slow, I don't need to gradually spend 30 minutes building it up to full speed. I can almost jump to full speed. But there's something about that warming up slow that really, really helps, even playing fast, you know.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree. I fully agree. And yeah, warm up is key. I don't do it enough. I should do it more. And folks, if you want to see my warm-up routine, tune in tomorrow night, because I always forget to warm up before I start playing on Monday nights. So and it's like, okay, we'll start with some chords and then some basic riffs. And then, like I say, you know, it's like a train. You don't just take off all of a sudden. You get up to speed. And I like that, Stephen Douglas. We can use that as the last question of the night. Simon, of all the modern plexis out there today, which one is your favorite, especially for the EVH tone? Now, I assume we're going to talk early EVH tone, folks.
Yes. Well, my understanding is he used the plexi right up and even including 5150, and it was after that he changed. So the plexi, the best one that I have found and the one that I'm using, and Stephen, if you want to hear me using this amp, I did a recent upload on my YouTube channel of Eddie's Live Without a Net solo, and the amp I used for that is the Sir SL68, and it sounds great. So, you know, John Sir has done a wonderful job. That even if you take it apart and have a look inside at the circuitry of that amp, it is meticulously built, and he did specifically build it, I believe, to the that 1968 era plexi, which of course is Ed's. Right. So I would say, in fact, Sir has just come out with an updated Mac 2 version of the SL68. So, Stephen, if you're looking around for one, I would definitely check that out. I can't speak. I know there's some other ones that are very highly spoken of around the world, like Metropolis, George Metropolis.
Tom agrees, and I know Tom's got a bunch of plexi style stuff at his place, including Metropolis and OG plexis too of some kind. I think they're plexi or plexi bay. I'll call anything without a master volume as a plexi. You know,
yeah, me too. And I've had some other great plexis, and I've had some of the Marshall hand-built reissue ones as well. But the one that for me was, as soon as I plugged it in and, you know, dimed everything and turned it on 10, that sounded like Ed, was the Sir SL68, and so definitely check that out. But if anyone wants to hear that in action, and I think we've already talked about this on previous shows, Ben, but I didn't use a plexi for the Van Halen 1 video. I used just because there was no sound check time, and with these guitar shows, you know, there's 5 bands on in the day.
Yeah,
I wanted a plug and play solution, so I used a Kemper for that. But for my YouTube videos, I've been using the SL68 because I can, you know, dime it, take as long as I want, run it through an attenuator. And so Stephen, if you're interested in hearing that, check out my latest YouTube post.
Mm-hmm. There we are. Awesome.
I'd love to, and Tom, I'd love to try one of those Metropolis ones. Unfortunately, they're rare as hen's teeth down in Australia. Otherwise, I would 100%. I think George makes incredible stuff, and I think George has got great ears.
Yeah, I was going to say, and if you find a 1971 Super Lead in Australia, it was probably owned by the Young brothers at one time.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Awesome. I think this has been an awesome show. We definitely discussed a variety of topics. We'll definitely do it again and not wait as long. I will say, our good friend Trev, AK Symmetry, is like, you got to get Haas on all the time. I'm like, he's out touring, but we'll try. And so I thought you were back home off tour when I reached out to you, but apparently not. But that's fine.
Well, I'm in Australia, but just not home in my studio. So Yeah, but look, I'm obviously, Ben, happy to jump on anytime you want. So just throw me a message, and if I can, I will. And
Sure.
yeah, thanks everyone in the chat for the questions too.
Yeah, and of course, I'll be back tomorrow night playing some guitars on Canucks with Guitars, as well as we're going to show some bad album covers. We'll be giving away some channel memberships as well. And yeah, always fun. Get your requests handy, and maybe I'll know some of them. If not, it inspires me to learn new material, which I always enjoy trying to learn. No, I don't enjoy it at all. I do, but I don't. You know what it means? It's a delicate balance, Haas. You know, it's like, yes, I want to learn this. And you're like, wow, this is really hard. I don't know if I want to learn it, but you know,
yes, it is.
That's me balancing the want with the laziness. Perfect. So yeah, hold the line here, and we'll talk off air. Thanks everybody that tuned in tonight. We had a great crowd again.
Thanks everyone.
Please subscribe to both myself and Haas's channel. Thanks, Terry, for putting the links in here. And we'll see y'all tomorrow night. Hold those doors open. I don't know. Let Charles Green in ahead of you in traffic. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Karma is real. Happy tone chasing. And, of course, don't litter. Ooh, look at you, lasers. Nice.
Yeah, I like